Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Steve's View. Today, I want to talk about one of the biggest developments in international politics right now. The latest proposal on the Palestinian issue, announced by President Trump and backed by some of his top advisors. This proposal has already sparked a wave of reactions, not only from Israel and the Palestinians, but also from Arab states across the Middle East, and even from analysts watching here in the United States. Now, I'm not just going to summarize the headlines for you. I've gone through the details of what was actually said. I've looked at how different sides responded, and I want to share both the facts and my own take on what this means. So consider this not just a recap, but also a commentary, where I'll walk you through the news and give you my perspective along the way. So let's start with the news itself. President Trump recently unveiled a new plan that aims to address the long-standing conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. According to Trump, this proposal is supposed to offer a way forward after months of intense violence and political deadlock. One of the key points is that Trump is pushing for Hamas to release all Israeli hostages immediately. He's also calling for Hamas to be fully disarmed and banned from governing Gaza in the future. In other words, under this plan, Hamas would no longer have political power, and Gaza would need to transition toward a different kind of governance structure. At the same time, Trump emphasized that the Palestinian people should still have a future. But in his framing, that future cannot include Hamas running the show. He positioned Hamas as the main obstacle to peace, not only for Israel, but also for Palestinians themselves. Now, you might be wondering, why is Trump pushing this so aggressively right now? Well, in my opinion, the timing wasn't random. A recent Israeli strike on a target in Qatar set off alarm bells across the Arab world. Many Arab governments started to panic, worried that the war in Gaza might spiral into a regional conflict that could destabilize their own countries. That moment of crisis, in Trump's eyes, was the right time to roll out a plan that says, let's contain this, let's stabilize the region, and let's set some new rules of the game. From Israel's perspective, Trump's plan checks all the right boxes. For years, Israeli leaders have insisted on three things. First, the release of hostages. Second, the complete disarmament of Hamas. Third, ensuring Hamas can't return to power in Gaza. This plan essentially delivers on all three. That's why Prime Minister Netanyahu and other Israeli officials responded so positively. They see it as validation of their war strategy and as international backing for their long-term security goals. Now, I have to say, this isn't surprising. Israel has always framed Hamas not just as a terrorist threat, but as an existential danger. So any international plan that undermines Hamas automatically looks good in Israeli eyes. But here's where my commentary comes in. I think Israel's support is more than just about policy. It's also about optics. By aligning with Trump's plan, Israel gets to show both its own citizens and the world that it's not acting in isolation. It can say, look, the US is with us. We're not alone in this fight. And in international politics, that kind of narrative is almost as important as the military realities on the ground. Now, here's where it gets interesting. On the surface, many Arab countries were critical. They issued statements condemning the plan, saying it undermines Palestinian rights, or that it favors Israel too much. That's the public line. But behind the scenes, a lot of Arab governments actually quietly welcomed Trump's move. Why? Because they're terrified of chaos. Think about it. Countries like Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia have no interest in seeing Gaza become a permanent battlefield that spills over into their own borders. The last thing they want is a new wave of extremism or instability undermining their regimes. So, while they might shout slogans in public, privately, they see Trump's plan as a way to calm things down. If you look at recent years, the Abraham Accords already showed that many Arab states are willing to normalize with Israel when it suits their own interests. The Palestinian issue, while still emotionally powerful, no longer dictates every Arab government's policy. Security and regime stability matter more. So, in my opinion, the public anger versus private support dynamic is real. And that's why I don't think Arab states will actively sabotage Trump's plan. They might not endorse it openly, but they won't work hard to block it either. For Hamas, this plan is a nightmare. If it goes through, they lose everything: their weapons, their governing authority, and their political legitimacy. Hamas leaders immediately rejected the proposal, of course. They said it was biased, one-sided, and unacceptable. And to be fair, from their perspective, it is. It basically demands that they dismantle themselves. But here's the cold reality. Hamas is increasingly isolated. After months of brutal fighting, their forces have been weakened. Israel has destroyed much of their infrastructure. Their regional backers, like Iran, are under huge pressure. And Arab governments are not lining up to defend them anymore. From my point of view, this is the clearest signal that Hamas's long-term survival is in question. Even if they reject Trump's plan today, the fact that the US and Israel are framing Hamas as the main obstacle, and that Arab states aren't rushing to save them, means the clock is ticking. Now, let's talk about Trump himself. I call Trump's move as a masterstroke of political timing because Trump has a knack for seizing opportunities when others are still reacting to events. By rolling out this plan right after the Qatar incident, Trump positioned himself as the leader who has a solution while others are panicking. It fits his style perfectly: decisive, bold, and aimed at making headlines. But here's my personal critique. While the timing was smart, the content of the plan isn't exactly revolutionary. It basically repeats Israel's demands and repackages them as an American-led initiative. So yes, it looks strong politically, but in terms of solving the deeper conflict, I'm not convinced. Because let's be honest, this isn't just about hostages, weapons, or Hamas. It's about decades of mistrust, displacement, and national identity. And no single plan, no matter how cleverly timed, is going to erase that history. This brings me to what I think is the most important point. When Trump and his team talk about peace and stability, what they really mean is short-term conflict management. They want to freeze the crisis at a manageable level, not resolve it completely. Why do I say that? The real goal isn't just Gaza, it's about the bigger strategic picture. In Ukraine, the war has reached a stalemate. Russia isn't collapsing, but it's also not advancing dramatically. So the US isn't as worried about Ukraine spiraling out of control right now. In the Middle East, Iran has taken serious hits. Between Israeli strikes and US pressure, Tehran is weaker than it was a year ago. So again, not the top priority. But in Asia, China is building up military pressure on Taiwan. Unlike Russia or Iran, China has both the capacity and the motivation to challenge the US directly. And that's why, in my view, this Palestinian plan is partly about clearing the table. If the US can calm the Middle East, even temporarily, it can shift more focus toward China. That's the part you won't hear openly in Trump's speeches. But strategically, it makes sense. The US doesn't want to be stuck firefighting in Gaza while Beijing is ramping up preparations in the Taiwan Strait. So what do I make of all this? On the surface, Trump's proposal looks like a bold peace initiative. It appeals to Israel, quietly reassures Arab states, and puts Hamas in a corner. It also makes Trump look like a decisive leader in a time of crisis. But underneath, it's less about solving the Palestinian issue and more about managing it, keeping it contained so the US can turn its attention elsewhere, especially toward China. That doesn't mean the plan is meaningless. In fact, if it buys even a few months or years of reduced violence, that's already a win for many in the region. But I think we should be careful not to overstate it. The deep roots of the conflict remain, and no plan can erase those overnight. As an American watching this unfold, my takeaway is this: we need to pay attention not just to what leaders say in public, but to what they're preparing for behind the scenes. Right now, all signs suggest that while the Middle East is being managed, the real storm clouds are gathering in the Pacific. And that's where I'll wrap up today's video. Thanks for listening to my breakdown of Trump's Palestinian proposal, the reactions from different sides, and what I think it really means for U.S. strategy. If you found this analysis helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And let me know in the comments, do you think Trump's plan has a real chance of working, or is it just political theater?